back to the Women's Biz Tribe Next Level Success Summit. Thank you for all of the fantastic feedback that you've been giving via all the different platforms, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. Oh my goodness, it's been so great to be connecting with women and men from around the globe who are just getting inspired by so many amazing speakers. So keep the chats going, keep the engagement happening. As always, for those who've been tuning in for a lot of speakers, you can actually just find all of us at Women's Biz Tribe in the Facebook group where we meet every single day. You can just tap into whatever you like. You've joined our global community complimentary as part of this summit. Now, I am so excited about introducing you to our next speaker. Her name is Ally Hensley. And Ally is a bit of a beautiful, beautiful spirit. She is a writer, she's a speaker, she's a global ambassador for women's health and happiness, which I'm all about. Ally has written for leading publications on mental health, infertility, body positivity, and has become a regular media interviewee and speaker on topics linked to health and well-being and creating content that actually matters to those people who are consuming them. She's super inspired by conscious startups and how to become that international go-to on how to maximize impact with big ideas and heart. And we're all about that here at Women's Biz Tribe. I'm going to let Ally share with you today. She's going to tell you more about who she is, her journey, and pretty much what success means to her and those that she works with around the globe. So over to you, Ally.
Thank you so much, Annie. You are ridiculously infectious, first and foremost. And you delivered that bio so well. I was like, oh, my, yeah, actually, Ally, you've done good.
Pretty awesome. Yes, you are.
Yeah, it's good to hear your bio read back to you. Actually, a bit of life affirmation there. But obviously, Annie, thank you so much for inviting me on to this incredible speaker summit. I've obviously had the pleasure of knowing you for a number of years in various capacities. So can I just say, first and foremost, thank you for creating the Women's Biz Tribe. It is something that is hugely necessary. Not only is it incredible to have global networks and communities, but as we are still emerging from the global pandemic, one of the biggest epidemics, let's say, if we're facing next, is disconnection and sense of loneliness. And this actually ticks that box hugely. So I'm so pleased to be part of this summit and share with you what success means to me. So as Annie so wonderfully put, my name obviously is Ally. I am a writer, journalist, speaker, global ambassador, and advocate for women's health and happiness. And this came about by a very, let's say, a milestone moment when I was 16 years old. So my success is my story that started way back in my teens, now some 23 years ago. And I just want to preface this talk by saying that I may refer to content that could be triggering, such as mental health, infertility, eating disorders, and that yucky stuff that sadly a lot of people do go through, but can recover from, as I hope to testify to that. So I'm going to just dive straight in, as I would on any talk. I'm going to be talking about a very unique medical condition. And this condition is called Mayer-Rokitansky-Kauster-Hauser syndrome. And this condition is obviously shortened as an acronym to MRKH, but it's also otherwise known as Müllerian agenesis, and that means absent of or underdeveloped reproductive tract. So when I was 16, as most young girls typically would be, is waiting for that first period to arrive. I had all the science classes under my belt from school. I had read the girly mags, and obviously I had been around a community of women growing up, and that just seemed to be the done deal. You have your first period. However, mine failed to arrive. And although I did go to the doctors and they sent me away for another year, they couldn't really determine why it just never came, possibly just be a late starter. But a year later, still no first period had arrived. And it was at that point that my parents quite rightly took me down to the GP and started to ask for more investigatory treatment and looking at why possibly my body just wasn't following a natural and normal path. I'm not a fan of the word normal unless we're talking about normalizing differences. And so it was discovered that I had this condition. And what that means is that my body, in the first 6 to 8 weeks of gestation in my mother's womb, that's when we form our necessary organs. And part of that process in the 6 to 8 weeks is your reproductive system. And so my ovaries were formed and they were firing, which means estrogen was going throughout my body. And typically and externally, my body did look like you'd think of a female. But unfortunately, the genetic pothole hit that bump. And it was at that moment that my body did not form a uterus, a cervix, and a vaginal canal. But as I say, externally, you'd never know. And so when I was born, there was no reason to suspect anything different. As you can imagine, at 16 years old, I was practically a child, learning that to have a sexual relationship with a partner, I would have to undergo vaginal dilation treatment, but I would always be infertile. So off I went to London just after my sweet 16, and I went to a 3-day inpatient treatment program where I was told and taught how to create a vaginal canal through the use of dilatory therapy. So essentially, we're just talking about very clinical tubes, doing a practice to yourself to eventually create this vagina over a period of, for me, 9 months. On reflection, I understand now that it was in those 3 days in hospital where I was really combating my first big trauma. We expect there's a rite of passageway to womanhood and motherhood, and those intrinsic parts are just a given, or so we think. And so when I was hit with this truck of reality, I didn't have the tools. There was not much information around then. No research and no real support to help people like me. And unfortunately, despite leaving the treatment plan successfully, I did actually, unfortunately, delve into a life of self-esteem blows, massive destruction, because I was desperate to find out if I wasn't a woman like everybody assumes that they would be, what was my role in life? And of course, navigating relationships, friendships, any type of interpersonal exchanges that you have with people, there's a lot of conversations out there that we just assume as givens. So as a young 20-year-old, unfortunately, I was a moth to a flame when it came to really sadly destructive patterns, because I didn't have the tools to understand how to heal or communicate, and I never felt enough. And unfortunately, that took me on to somewhat of very dysfunctional relationships with men, with food, and actually harming myself. And that is a very sad thing to obviously hear out loud still to this day. I'm 41 years old. And so 10 years of topsy-turvy life, I eventually landed in Australia. I am an Australian citizen, currently based in London. And it was at that point in Australia where I was very tired of being a passenger in life. I knew that I needed to heal, and I thought that the universe owed me a debt that I was never entitled to receive, because what I realized was that I wasn't being punished. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I did have the right to have happiness in my life. And it was at that point my long-term relationship of 10 years collapsed, probably one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. And I always refer to a series of turnaround moments in my life. And one of those significant moments was, of course, living in the incredible Bondi Beach with spirituality and yoga on every corner. But my poor mum, who's very much well and alive and healthy today, but she did suffer a stroke. And it was at that point that I rushed back on a plane and I saw and witnessed her choice to heal and recover. And I thought that if I didn't do the same, it would be an absolute injustice to her recovery. So that is what I did. I found a hospital in Sydney and I asked if MRKH support existed for people like me. So I was on the hunt and I was ready to confront my past. Unfortunately, no peer support groups, existed. But what they did see in me, and I think what I was starting to see in me, was the ability to really champion something that would help. I worked in the corporate industry for a very long time, and I had the skills and wit and business acumen about me to start developing something. And so in 2013, we held our very first MRKH support group meeting, where some lovely 11 souls showed up and listened to various presentations from expert doctors, psychologists, nurse practitioners, and myself is my own story. And then I guess a peer support group leader. Year after year, we started seeing the numbers grow, and I had found finally my purpose. Not only was I healing myself, but I was really supporting the women around Australia, their friends and their family on how to navigate such a traumatic diagnosis. 10 years later, we were then welcoming over 70 people to our events. I had been on the news. I was a patient advocate for the uterus transplant trials in Australia, and I created the first organisation in Australia designed to support and advocate for the MRKH diagnosis. And I always say that that's when my second life truly began, and I was making some incredible headway with researchers and then global advocates. And in 2016, I created, along with a wonderful woman in America, Amy Lossy, with the beautiful MRKH Foundation, Global MRKH, which was the first international consortium designed not so much to be a peer support group, but really join all the countries together and work out what are we doing well and what can we do better. I am from a very privileged background in England. We have the NHS system here at the time, where I was diagnosed, and the referral pattern that, whilst difficult for me individually, I was actually in very good hands. And sadly, around the globe, that just isn't the case for people. Unfortunately, in India, there has known to be mercy killings. In certain countries, vaginal dilation isn't even permitted. So what do these people do next? And it's a very devastating and tragic reality for these people. And so it is important for those who have a voice to really represent those who don't. And that is what I chose to do. And that was a large part of my life. And then eventually the global pandemic hit. And I think that we were all forced to really reflect on our current lives, our situations, our passions. Where do we want to be? What do we want to be doing? And it really, if you don't get shaken by a global pandemic, nothing probably will. And it was at that time that I decided to return back to the UK to be closer to my mother and my father. And I guess, to be honest, leave a corporate life behind and really not just dive into MRKH advocacy, because I did that for a very long time and I served its purpose for a lot. And then it was obviously, given over to other caretakers and other people who could do the role. And that's what we designed it to be. So then it was my choice and chance to really think, well, what is Ally's next step? Because it's a very confronting and isolating feeling as an infertile person. And infertility does affect 1 in 8 people. So it's not a rare statistic. And unfortunately, it carries still so much stigma and taboo. And when you are looking down, I guess, the lens of infertility, it's an absolute injustice yourself again if you don't choose to replace that absence of a child and the absence of a family with something equally as magical. I am still finding all the parts of the piece when it comes to my magic, but my success really was, sadly, my darkest day. And it was at that point that I had lived my life gathering all this wonderful content, and I decided it was time to put pen to paper and write my very first memoir. And yeah, I have written under different authors' names. So I have written books and I'm very grateful for that. But it's a very difficult situation when you're having to recount all parts of your life. And it was a very hard process. I have now finished the book. It's now been edited, and I'm now going out to agents in London for it to be represented. And that was a lifetime in the making and 12 months in the writing, but it was all about how to repurpose our pain. And I think that inevitably we are going to overcome adversity if we have the ability to do so, and some sadly don't. But my ambition is to essentially make truth-telling trendy. I think it's important that we teach young women and girls to not hide behind the word normal, any type of, sadly, body positivity or sexual identity shame. And I think that the thing that I have learned and continue to learn is that we will never probably be incurable of being human, but we do deserve to feel enough. And so my success has probably been the luxury, I think, of being able to heal, not only to create global advocacy, but to write and to help other people write their stories. So whilst it seems a bit of a tragic story, it has, touch wood, had a really great outcome. And I think it's just incredible that I am today and over the next sort of 48-hour hoopla of incredible events, seeing people and women come to the screen, putting themselves out there and really backing their brand and backing their backstory. So Annie, you obviously have heard my story before because we have worked together for years, and I'm just so incredibly grateful that at one point we did sit on the MRKH Australia board together, and you were able to share your insights about how to really launch a not-for-profit first time round. And I'm so grateful that a topic like this isn't always for everybody. And sometimes, unfortunately, there can be censorship. And I've come into censorship problems in the past, but I've always decided to back my story. And I think that's one of the most incredible things that you champion people to do. So thank you for that.
Oh my goodness, it's an honor and joy to do that, to be honest with you, Ally. And I just want to acknowledge actually and honor what you have achieved in your lifetime today. Absolutely phenomenal. A time of, incredibly challenging lot in life that you've experienced, and then to have that kind of moment that you go to a hospital and ask for help and see what's available, and then you end up being the champion of MRKH, not only in Australia but internationally. And I've seen you in media all around the globe, and it's quite phenomenal the impact you have had and will continue to have. I can't wait to read your memoir, because I'm all about championing women to actually just be real, be honest. And some things are uncomfortable. Many things are not fair, and they're not okay in our perception of what's okay, but life is life, and our experiences are what we have to deal with. And I think the more that we actually share things uncensored, to actually say, this is my journey and this is the way I'm responding to it, and this is the way I'm growing into, who I am becoming, is just so fantastic. So I know that your book needs to be published. So if you are a publisher out there, definitely get in touch with Ally. She is dying to hear from you. Seriously, it needs to be on film. Messages of challenge, need to be shared, whatever they are in life. And I thank you for sharing that with us today. I think it's so wonderful that you have you've shown that evolution, I think, really clearly, that when you said that you made the change because it's almost like you feel bad if your mum could get over having a stroke and just getting herself, rehabilitated. Who were you? And I think that point actually is really pertinent to those people listening in that might be, sometimes we don't always do it for ourselves at the time. It's almost like, okay, well, I'll do it for my mum. I don't want mum to be disappointed in me. She's working so hard and things are so challenging. And that's actually okay. Don't you feel so? now the best option is when you're doing things for yourself, because you are enough as you are, whatever your situation is, and you want to thrive in that space. But if it's a stepping stone that sometimes you do make those choices for someone else, that's still a necessary part of the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think it tends to be, I think it's, some and some. I think in life there tends to be a catalyst, and that catalyst isn't always, something positive or this aha moment or this enlightenment. I think it can be sometimes being confronted with someone else's trauma to really reflect it back onto, what am I doing? And one of the significant things that was kind of circling around that time was that whilst my relationship was ending, I was also engineering some incredible friendships. And I think my friendships probably have become my greatest assets. And those friendships are strong women. And I think the word strong is also very objective, because strong can also be just quietly surviving. And it was through these friendships of people who had overcome, losing their husbands, marriage breakdowns, moving to new countries, it not always working. I chose to stay around people who were survivors. And if they were surviving on a daily basis, I mean, that's one of my biggest mantras, that every day I'm in the pursuit for a better day. And if it doesn't happen today, it can happen tomorrow. But I never give up on that, because, as you say, I think that however we get to that milestone moment where we really want to shift something, be it in business, holding on to the dream, finding that dream love, whatever that is for that person, and they're also very valid, I think it's just really important to give ourselves a chance. And I think that's what you do demonstrate so brilliantly in the Women's Biz Tribe, and obviously the incubator and those programs, is because it's completely unbiased, and it's completely inclusive to people around the globe. And I think there isn't a one size fits all version of success. But I do know that I've always said that I was meant to be born with MRKH to a degree. The situation was hard enough that I could empathize with it, but probably supportive enough that I could overcome it, because it really was my purpose. And I think on that, with the rise in social media and the people who are putting themselves out there and things like that, I think it's our responsibility as older women in different generations to really make sure that we're protecting these young people in that, in that onslaught of what's sharing, what's empowerment, what's brave, what's courage. And there's all different types. So yeah. It was wonderful to share that. I haven't shared that story for a while, so thank you. Last time I did it was in a book, and I was like, but you've given me the opportunity to remind myself, yeah, you've done good, Ally, and I think that's really special. So thank you.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Oh my goodness. I'm super excited about the gains that you have achieved, because of, you start something yourself and then you are incredibly collaborative. I've noticed on your journey that you've then, you've aligned with, top researchers at hospitals, obstetricians, people who are pioneering uterine transplants, surgeries. You've been in that space, and you have to do that to enforce change, right? And you're also acutely aware that, that we from the West are privileged, really. We do have opportunities to get referrals and treatments and things like that, even though uncomfortable and unpleasant. That the situation globally for those women in third world is really, really quite frightening. And you've only just touched on the reality of what that means. And I think it is so wonderful that you have shown what can be achieved by a single woman, and how powerful the collective can be. That when you champion all those, setting up MRKH Australia, and then having other organisations, with this condition being set up around the globe, and then having an international group. This is actually what is required in a space to move those mountains, to actually go and create have a solution for women who aren't living in privilege. And so I think we honor the work that you're doing, getting your message out, getting your book out, so that message, that story does get heard by those who have power to influence change. One question I'd love to ask you is that you said you had a partner for a long time, and then it fell apart. And at that time, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. We've been together a long time." You actually said in a passing moment, but it was probably the best thing. How did you really step into yourself in a different way when you were suddenly, not uncoupled, if you like, and then thought, "Okay, I actually have to have the next chapter for me"? What did that mean to you?
Oh, big question. I think my relationship with relationships, because of MRKH, were always damaged. Unfortunately, I used to sort of arrive at a relationship thinking that if someone took me on, they were doing me a favor. So I didn't ever, I know it's like, I can sort of feel that it's uncomfortable, but because I didn't believe in myself, I certainly didn't expect other people to believe in myself. And when the relationship ended, it was a very, how can I word this carefully? It was a very rigid dynamic. There wasn't an awful lot of freedom for me to be me. And I didn't know who I was as well. So I take that responsibility. And I was in Australia. My family were 10,000 miles away from home. I just started making friendships. I lived in Bondi for 3 years and I didn't even step onto the beach. And so I thought that I know this is literally how insular and isolated my life was. And I thought, well, really, why wouldn't you go back to the UK? Why wouldn't you just return home? Everything's fallen apart. And I think I realized in that moment that I really needed to discover who I was. And as terrifying as it was, I had to do that with the biggest challenge there was. And that was to start this new life without, I had family support, of course, paying the rent on my own, holding down jobs, making sure that it was only myself who's going to be accountable for me, forming really great friendships. And I think whilst the end of any big relationship comes with a massive amount of grieving and loss and pain, it tends to probably be the precipice for something incredible as well. And as you said, creating global synergy, this wasn't my 9 to 5, but it was a tireless effort to really communicate with people. And I think that every business needs some financial backing. And I think even my cause required profit to run. But a doctor in the World Congress actually asked, how did you do it? Like there was a really complex formula behind it. And I said, we started with a room, 10 chairs, and a space for people to share their story, and vice versa, hear back from the experts. And we kept repeating that. And really that formula was the same for that room as it almost was for the globe, because what we were doing was creating a safe space for people to talk. And we've been doing this for millions of years, but it just comes in different forms. So if we think about Bible study groups, eating disorder therapy groups, writers' circles, even addictive, Alcoholics Anonymous, the whole premise is exactly the same across these stories. People come together, they share, they relate, they empathize, they connect, and they grow. And that I will swing back to the tribe itself, because as you say, you're operating this global platform for people to come and share. And I think it's the biggest thing we as women, if we can do, because when women, it's a cliche statement potentially, but when women come together, they thrive. We're not meant to be silo creatures. We've always sat in circle. So that was a very big answer to your first question. But as hard as the new life was to start, it was the most incredible, magical part of my chapters that I have and I don't know if I'll top it. Maybe I will. We'll see. If someone wants to publish with it, make a film, open to offers.
Exactly. Never say never. You've definitely just got a publishing deal and films and other things in the horizon. So yes, never be limited. I know we're going to have to finish there, but I just love those points that Ally has highlighted. It's the power of the collective, that together we rise, that the principles of, you know, doing business and life successfully always come down to how strong you are in your own self and getting yourself grounded and self-assured and secured, and that you actually love yourself and value yourself, because if you don't respect yourself, why would anyone else, and how is anything else going to work out in a positive way for you? And it's really easy to say that, but when you're in those stages, you know, it can be just so challenging. And so if you're in the fog, if you're listening in, Ally is a great person to talk to, because she's demonstrated, you know, that through all the challenges that have been presented to her, she has just keep pushing through. She's used alliances. She's really championed a cause that was important to her. And we've all got issues that, you know, are our thing. So, you know, MRKH is a very specific conversation that we're talking about today, but there's so many other challenges. Everyone has something that's on their heart that is at times a barrier for them, limits them in some ways. And so the principles of what's been shared today are just so true for all of you listening in. I encourage you can find Ally in the tribe. You've all got complimentary of the tribe. Definitely, if you've got any questions, you can pop them in the chat if they're appropriate. If you want to have a personal chat with her, definitely go and find her in the tribe. And I thank you so much for your honest and real, candid sharing today. I absolutely love you, and I love all that you stand for, and I continue to watch with bated breath as to the future changes that you are going to be part of in this world.
Oh, ditto, Annie. Ditto, Annie. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.